The alien High Council gathered in their grand chamber, an awe-inspiring structure floating above the core of their empire's capital world. This was the seat of absolute power in the galaxy, where the most advanced civilizations decided the fate of lesser species. The topic of the day? Humanity. A lesser species, barely a blip on the galactic scale, had somehow made waves. The Council had observed them for decades, monitoring their primitive wars and reckless expansion. They were a violent, emotional species, intelligent, but not refined like the great empires that ruled the stars. The projections were clear. If humanity continued its reckless expansion, it would inevitably collide with the established order. The Council had seen this before. A young species growing too quickly, reaching beyond its station, only to be put down before it could become a threat. The simulations are undeniable, Grand Chancellor Velik intoned, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. The human species lacks the discipline, the unity, and the technological prowess to challenge us. Within one standard cycle, they will be eradicated. There was murmured agreement among the gathered delegates. The prediction models showed the same thing. War with humanity was inevitable, and its outcome was predetermined. Humanity would struggle, perhaps put up a fight, but ultimately, the combined forces of the Council would crush them. But then, something happened. An urgent alarm blared through the chamber. The holographic star charts shifted, displaying real-time fleet movements. Council-controlled sectors near the Terran border were under attack. No, not just attacked. Entire fleets had vanished. Vanished. The chamber erupted into chaos. "How is this possible?" demanded an elder from the Vorn Dominion. "Their technology is inferior. Their fleets are barely spaceworthy compared to ours." "They shouldn't be able to outmaneuver our defenses," another growled, his multiple eyes flickering with confusion. Yet the reports were clear. Humanity had done the impossible. In mere minutes, the balance of power had shifted. The aliens had expected a conventional war, a long, drawn-out conflict where superior technology would overwhelm the humans. But they had underestimated them in the worst possible way. Humans didn't fight fair. Instead of massing their fleets for an honorable engagement, they struck in ways no other species had dared to. Sabotage, electronic warfare, precision strikes on command centers. By the time the Council fleets even realized they were at war, half their forces had been neutralized. It wasn't just brute force, it was strategy, ruthless, cunning, and utterly without mercy. The most shocking part? Humans weren't just winning, they were laughing while doing it. Encrypted human transmissions intercepted by the Council's intelligence division revealed something the aliens could barely comprehend. Jokes, taunts, and war cries filled with an emotion the Council's elite species had long abandoned. Excitement. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were enjoying this. The Grand Chancellor's claws dug into the polished stone table. For the first time in centuries, fear crept into his voice. "We have underestimated them." The Council chamber, once filled with confidence and quiet arrogance, was now consumed by panic. The assembled alien leaders, each representing the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, had never witnessed anything like this. The reports continued to flood in. A fleet of human warships had bypassed an entire defensive sector by hijacking the Council's own hyperlane network. How? They had cracked the uncrackable encryption of the Council's navigational relays in mere hours. The grand fleets stationed at the edges of human space? Gone. Not destroyed in battle, eliminated before they could even engage. Human strike teams had infiltrated command ships, disabled reactors, and left entire armadas adrift, helpless and blind. "They're not fighting like warriors," a member of the Jatari Dominion screeched, his translucent tendrils quivering in fear. "They don't follow the rules of engagement." The Council had always fought wars in a predictable manner, fleet against fleet, army against army, honorably and methodically. But humans? They fought like devils. They disrupted supply lines, turned Council technology against its creators, and targeted high-ranking officials with terrifying precision. Council commanders, who had never feared anything in their long and luxurious lives, now found themselves hunted. One by one, the galaxy's finest admirals vanished. Some were eliminated in their own bunkers. Others found their warships inexplicably shut down before a single shot could be fired. And then, the worst news arrived. A lone human task force, no, not a task force, a team, had reached the Council's inner sanctum. They had bypassed every layer of defense, slipped through undetectable corridors in hyperspace, and were now on a direct course for the capital world itself. "They cannot have gotten this far," Grand Chancellor Velek whispered, his voice a mixture of rage and disbelief. "They have," came a cold response from his intelligence officer, "and they are broadcasting a message." The chamber fell silent as the transmission was played for all to hear. It wasn't the voice of a formal diplomat, nor a fearful plea for mercy. It was casual, almost amused. A human's voice, deep and confident, spoke through the static. "Hey there, Council big shots. Hope we're not interrupting anything important." The Council's leaders stiffened at the sheer audacity. "We figured you guys were making all these fancy projections about how we'd lose. Thought we'd give you a little reality check." The human's voice shifted, a smirk practically audible through the speakers. "We're not here to negotiate. We're not here to beg. We're here to win." Silence. The transmission cut off, but the meaning was clear. The humans hadn't come to plead for survival. They had come to conquer. The chamber was dead silent. The alien leaders, the so-called rulers of the galaxy, sat frozen in place, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. This wasn't how wars were fought. This wasn't how lesser species behaved. And yet, here they were, on the verge of losing everything, not in years or months, but in minutes. Grand Chancellor Velek felt his chest tighten as he turned to his intelligence officer. "Where is our fleet? Where are our reinforcements?" The officer's skin, usually a deep and regal blue, had paled to a sickly shade. His mandibles twitched in distress. The human forces have disabled our long-range communications. We cannot coordinate a defense." Velek's claws dug into the table. "Then our local fleets will handle them. We outnumber the humans. We outgun them." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the human fleet heading toward us isn't large. It consists of only a handful of ships." That stunned the entire chamber. A handful? Against the most fortified world in the galaxy? Against planetary defense platforms capable of reducing moons to rubble? It had to be a bluff. It had to be some kind of human deception. Velek's voice turned sharp. "Then why are you panicking? Have the orbital defense grids prepare to vaporize them the moment they exit hyperspace." "They already have," the officer said. "And yet—" His eyes flickered toward the central display as a new alert appeared. The humans had arrived. The star chart zoomed in on the system's outer perimeter. True to the reports, only a few ships had made the jump, far too few to mount any meaningful assault. But something was wrong. The planetary defense grid, the most sophisticated in the known galaxy, did not open fire. Instead, the entire system went dark. "What is happening?" Velek snarled. "Why aren't our weapons firing?" "Sir, The intelligence officer was shaking now. "I don't know. Our entire system has been overwritten." Then, the chamber's central hologram changed. Instead of displaying fleet positions and defense parameters, it showed something infinitely more terrifying: a single human face. Unlike the grand and imposing figures of the council, he looked utterly unremarkable. Short-cropped hair, sharp brown eyes, and a relaxed expression that was entirely too confident for someone standing against the galaxy's mightiest empire. When he spoke, it wasn't in a booming, authoritative voice. It was calm, almost casual. "Hello, council members." He smiled. Velik's throat tightened. "My name is Captain David Rains of the Terran Expeditionary Forces." The human tilted his head slightly. "You might be wondering why your planetary defenses aren't working. Well, turns out you guys built everything on a system that's way too easy to hack. We figured that out about 20 minutes ago." A cold wave of horror washed over the council. Their greatest defenses, useless. Their fleets, leaderless. Their communications, severed. "And before you start thinking about sending reinforcements," Rains continued, "I'd like to point out that we've already won. Your fleets are cut off, your commanders are missing, and in about 2 minutes, your orbital stations are going to realize that they've been turned against you." A pause. "Now," he added, his smile widening, "we could bomb your capital into the dirt, but that'd be a waste of time. Instead, I have a better idea." The entire council chamber leaned forward. "We're taking over." Velik couldn't breathe. "I suggest you surrender now," the human said, still smiling, "or things might get really messy." Panic erupted in the council chamber. Alien dignitaries shouted over one another, their voices laced with fear and disbelief. Some demanded immediate retaliation, others whispered about escape plans. The most powerful beings in the galaxy, who had spent centuries ruling with absolute authority, were now reduced to terrified bureaucrats. Grand Chancellor Velik slammed a clawed hand against the table, silencing the room. His mind raced, trying to process the impossible. This was not how wars were fought. No drawn-out campaigns, no years of brutal conflict. The humans had skipped all of that. They had gone straight for the throat. His gaze snapped back to the holographic display, where Captain David Rains still stared at them, that infuriating human smirk on his face. You think you've won?" Velik growled, his voice filled with barely restrained fury. "You think a few tricks make you the masters of the galaxy?" Rains chuckled. "I don't think we've won," he said. "I know we have." Velik's claws dug into the table. "We still have fleets across the galaxy. Oh, you mean the fleets that no longer have functional navigation?" Rains cut in, amusement in his voice. "Yeah, we kind of scrambled your FTL network. Your admirals are either stranded or spinning in circles trying to figure out what went wrong." The room froze. Scrambled the entire FTL network? That was impossible. No species, not even the Council's most advanced researchers, could do that. It would take centuries of careful hacking, fleets of AI specialists working tirelessly, unless, of course, you were human. "You underestimated us," Rains continued. "You thought we'd fight like you. Grand fleets, long campaigns, honorable engagements. But that's the thing about humanity. You gave us rules, and we ignored them." Velik's breath came in shallow bursts. This wasn't just a war. This was a coup. And the humans had executed it perfectly. A cold voice cut through the murmurs. "What do you want?" It came from an elder of the Vorn Dominion. Her eyes narrowed. Rains leaned forward, resting his chin on one hand. "Oh, it's simple, really. You guys are done. No more council. No more ruling over the galaxy like some ancient gods. Effective immediately, humanity is in charge." Gasps filled the chamber. "You cannot be serious," another alien sputtered. Shh." Rains held up a finger, mockingly. "I'm talking." The sheer disrespect made Velik's blood boil. "You have two choices," Rains continued. 1. You surrender, step down peacefully, and let humanity take the reins. In return, we don't completely destroy your way of life. You get to exist under new management. A pause. Option 2? Rains grinned, showing just enough teeth to make it unsettling. We turn this into a cleanup operation, and trust me, you really don't want to see what happens when humans stop being nice. The room fell into stunned silence. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was faced with an ultimatum. Not from another ancient empire. Not from a rising power that could be crushed before it became a threat. But from the very species they had dismissed as nothing more than savages. And now, those savages ruled the stars. The silence in the council chamber stretched on, thick with disbelief and barely contained terror. The most powerful rulers in the galaxy, beings who had commanded entire civilizations for centuries, were now at the mercy of a species they had deemed inferior. Grand Chancellor Valek's mind raced. This couldn't be real. The Council had spent centuries maintaining absolute control, ensuring that no upstart species could challenge their rule. And yet, in a matter of minutes, humanity had flipped the entire balance of power. How? How had they done it so effortlessly? Valek forced his voice to remain steady. And if we refuse? On the display, Captain Rains sighed theatrically. See, I was hoping you'd say that. He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease, as if he were discussing the weather. You guys seem to think this is a negotiation. It's not. A new alert flashed across the chamber's hollow displays. At first, Valek couldn't process what he was seeing. Then the realization struck him like a thunderbolt. They were losing control of the capital itself. Council security stations, hacked, orbital defense platforms shut down, planetary communication grids seized by human operatives. And worst of all, the citizens of the Council's capital world had no idea what was happening. The humans had taken everything without firing a single shot, without giving the Council time to respond. And now, the next phase was beginning. Valek's second-in-command let out a strangled gasp. Sir, we've lost access to the planetary defense network. Valek's claws dug into the table so hard the stone cracked. How? Rains smirked. Oh, that? We walked in the front door. The chamber erupted into chaos. Rains smirked. Oh, that? We walked in the front door. The chamber erupted into chaos. How is this possible? A Vorn elder hissed. This level of cyber warfare would take centuries of research? Rains finished for her. Yeah, if you followed your usual sluggish, proper methods. But humans? He chuckled. We don't play fair. We take shortcuts. We break things. And when someone tells us something is impossible, his grin widened. We prove them wrong. Valek's vision darkened at the edges. He was losing control. The worst part was, he knew why this had happened. The Council had underestimated humanity. Not just their technology or strategy, but their nature. The other species of the galaxy had grown complacent, following the same rules of engagement, the same traditions of war for thousands of years. They saw battle as an art form, a ritual of honor and strategy. Humans? Humans saw war as an equation to be solved. They didn't fight wars to prove their strength. They fought wars to win, and they had done it flawlessly. Valek's breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. He had no fleet to call upon, no defenses to rely on. The capital was already under human control. It just didn't know it yet. The council was finished. He turned back to the screen, locking eyes with Rains. And if we surrender? Rains shrugged. Like I said, you get to keep existing. Under new management, of course. Think of it as early retirement. The chamber fell into a stunned silence. They had no choice. With a shaking hand, Velik pressed the control panel before him, activating the official surrender protocol. His voice was hoarse as he spoke the words that would change history forever. The Galactic Council surrenders to humanity. Rains grinned. Smart choice. And with that, the age of the Council ended, and the era of humanity began. The weight of those words settled over the chamber like a funeral shroud. The most powerful empire in the galaxy, an unbreakable, ancient order, had just surrendered. To humans. Velik sat motionless, his claws still hovering over the control panel as the reality of his decision crushed down on him. This was the end, not just of the Council's rule, but of everything they had built. Across the chamber, alien dignitaries slumped in their seats, some in shock, others openly despairing. Murmured conversations of disbelief and quiet dread rippled through the ranks of once mighty leaders. And on the holo display, Captain David Rains simply smiled. "Well, that was easy," he said, leaning back with that insufferable human confidence. Velik's jaw tightened. "What now?" "Oh, don't worry. We've got a plan." Rains stretched his arms behind his head. "Step 1. We're dismantling your little empire. No more galactic aristocracy, no more higher species lording over the rest of the galaxy. That's over." An elder from the Jatari Dominion twitched. "And who will rule in our place? You?" Rains smirked. "Bingo." The chamber erupted into protests. "This is madness. You cannot expect us to accept. This is not how power transitions work." Rains clapped his hands together loudly, cutting through the noise. "You're all forgetting something important." His voice dropped just slightly, his expression hardening. "You don't have a choice." That sent a ripple of cold fear through the room. Rains continued, his tone now firm, businesslike. "Your fleets are useless. Your defenses are ours. Your planetary communications, completely under our control. The entire galaxy thinks you're still in charge. But as of right now, you're nothing but relics waiting to be archived." Velik's throat tightened. He had spent centuries at the pinnacle of power, making decisions that shaped entire civilizations. Now, he was being spoken to like a defeated war criminal, like an inferior. This is tyranny," one of the counselors whispered, voice laced with desperation. Rains gave a short, humorless laugh. "No, this is balance," Velik exhaled sharply. "And if we resist?" Rains leaned forward. "Then," he said, voice deadly calm, "we wipe your legacy from existence. We'll erase your history, dismantle your monuments, scatter your fleets to the void. There won't even be ruins left to remember you by." The threat was delivered so casually, so certainly, that it sent a chill down Velik's spine. The humans weren't just taking power. They were making sure no one ever took it from them again. For all their supposed brutality, the Council had never conquered like this. They had absorbed species, brought them under their rule, but always allowed them to exist in some form. Humanity was offering no such mercy. Total obedience, or total erasure. Velik swallowed. "And what of our people?" Rains shrugged. "That's up to you. Work with us, and they'll live under a fairer system than you ever gave them. Resist?" He tilted his head. "Well, let's just say humans don't like insurrections. We tend to solve them permanently." Another long silence. Velik slowly exhaled. He had no options, no weapons, no allies, no future. Only one path remained. His voice was hollow as he spoke. "Then we will serve." Rains grinned, leaning back in his chair. "Good choice." And just like that, the galaxy belonged to humans. The surrender was official. The Council chamber, once the heart of galactic power, had become nothing more than a stage for humanity's victory. The transmission cut off, leaving the alien leaders sitting in stunned silence. For the first time in centuries, they were no longer rulers. They were subjects. Velek felt the weight of it pressing down on him like a collapsing star. The council had always believed they were the peak of civilization, the architects of order. Now they were nothing, and the humans were the new masters of the galaxy. It was over. But humanity wasn't done yet. A deep thrum reverberated through the chamber, shaking the walls. It wasn't just the capital world that had fallen. Human ships were descending from orbit, landing. The room's doors hissed open, and for the first time in history, human boots stepped onto the sacred ground of the Galactic Council. Armed soldiers in sleek, black combat armor moved in with terrifying precision, their weapons held at the ready, but not raised. They didn't need to. The fear alone was enough to paralyze every being in the room. At their center walked Captain Rains, but this time he wasn't a voice on a screen. He was here, in the flesh. Velek had spent his life looking down on lesser species, but as Rains approached, he felt something he had never experienced before. Instinctive, primal fear. Humans weren't the largest, strongest, or most advanced species in the galaxy, but their presence, the sheer weight of their existence, was undeniable. Rains stopped in front of Velek, meeting his gaze with unsettling amusement. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Velek forced himself to stand. Even in defeat, he was still the Grand Chancellor of the Council. You've won," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Why come here yourself?" Rains smirked. "Because I wanted to see the moment the galaxy changed." He swept his gaze over the chamber. "You lot had a good run. Centuries of control, but you got complacent. You thought your old ways would last forever." He took a step closer. "You never expected us." Velek clenched his fists. "What now?" Rains tilted his head. "Now? Now we rebuild. You get to play nice under human leadership, and in return we don't wipe your species off the map." A ripple of unease spread through the room. They knew he wasn't bluffing. You can't possibly rule the entire galaxy," one of the elders muttered, almost as if trying to convince themselves. "It's too vast, too complex." Rains chuckled. "That's the thing. We're really good at adapting. And unlike you, we don't need centuries to make decisions. We'll have this place running smoother than you ever did." He turned back to Velek. "Speaking of which, I think you'll like your new job." Velek stiffened. "Job?" "Oh, don't look so surprised," Rains said, patting him on the shoulder like an old friend. "You're going to help us manage this transition. Call it repayment for all those years you spent treating the rest of the galaxy like dirt." Velek's mandibles tightened. "You mean serve under you?" "Exactly," Rains grinned. The humiliation was unbearable. But what choice did he have? The council was finished. And humanity? Humanity had won. The weight of humanity's victory pressed down on Velek like a planetary gravity well. He had spent his entire existence at the pinnacle of power, commanding fleets, dictating the fate of entire civilizations with a mere word. Now he was nothing more than a servant to a species the council had dismissed as reckless, primitive upstarts. Rains let the silence hang for a moment before clapping his hands together. "All right then. Now that we're all on the same page, let's talk about what comes next." A shiver of unease rippled through the room. The alien leaders had no illusions left. Humanity owned them now. Rains gestured to his soldiers, who moved with disciplined efficiency, unfurling holographic displays in the center of the chamber. "Step 1. The council, as you know it, is officially dissolved. No more bureaucratic nonsense. No more higher species hoarding power." One of the elders, an aged Vorn with trembling tendrils, dared to speak. "And who governs now?" Rains grinned. Us. Murmurs of despair filled the chamber. Some of the older, more stubborn councillors couldn't comprehend it. A Jotari noble's voice wavered as he asked, "And what of our people? What becomes of them?" Rains tilted his head. "That depends entirely on you." Velik's throat tightened. He had studied war. He had studied conquest. He knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't just a change in power. This was a purge. The humans didn't just want to rule the galaxy. They wanted to reshape it. Rains leaned forward, resting his hands on the council's grand table. "See, you guys spent centuries treating the other species like lesser beings, enforcing your rules, deciding who got to rise and who stayed in the dirt." His gaze sharpened. "That ends today." The chamber fell deathly silent. "The way I see it, you have two options," Rains continued, his tone casual but filled with cold finality. "Option 1, you help us. You use your knowledge, your influence, to make this transition smooth. In return, you get to keep your comfortable little lives." He let that hang in the air for a second before his smile faded. "Option 2?" His voice dropped to something much more dangerous. "You resist. You scheme. You try to hold on to the scraps of your old power." A pause. "And we make sure your species is never a problem ever again." The meaning was clear. The humans were not here to negotiate. They were here to rule. One of the councillors, a reptilian zealoth, hissed, You would exterminate entire civilizations?" Rains shrugged. "Not if they cooperate." Velik swallowed hard. He had seen tyrants rise and fall. He had orchestrated the downfall of entire worlds. But the humans, they weren't acting like conquerors. They were acting like engineers, tearing down the old system and replacing it with something new. The council chamber, once a place of absolute control, had become a prison. The leaders of the galaxy, once untouchable, now had chains around their necks, and humanity held the leash. Rains straightened, clapping his hands again. "So, who's ready to make history?" No one spoke, because deep down they all knew history had already been rewritten, and it belonged to humans now. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. Every alien present understood one thing. Humanity had not merely won a war. They had rewritten the rules of the galaxy itself. Velik forced himself to breathe steadily, though the weight of his own insignificance threatened to crush him. He was no longer the Grand Chancellor of the Galactic Council. He was a relic of a fallen empire, staring into the cold, unyielding future that humanity had crafted in a matter of hours. Rains stood before them, arms crossed, a smirk still lingering on his face. "I get it," he said, feigning sympathy. "This is a lot to take in. You spent centuries thinking you were untouchable, invincible, and then we came along and flipped the board." No one responded. Because what was there to say? The truth was undeniable. The Council had spent decades crafting strategies to suppress growing civilizations, ensuring no species could ever challenge their dominance. They had honed warfare into an art of patience, slow and methodical, waged through careful manipulation. But humans didn't play by those rules. They had come like a storm, a force of nature that no one had seen coming, and by the time the Council realized what was happening, it was already over. Rains let the silence linger before speaking again, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "Now I know some of you are already thinking about rebellion. Maybe you think you can bide your time, wait for the right moment to strike back." He tilted his head, studying them like a scientist observing a failed experiment. "Bad idea." One of the councillors, a pale-skinned Kordashian, found his voice. "You expect us to believe you can hold the galaxy through brute force? Even if you've won, you're only a fraction of the galactic population. The moment you loosen your grip, everything will unravel. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Rains just laughed. Oh, you still don't get it. He shook his head. This isn't about brute force. This isn't even about military power. His smirk widened. It's about something you've never understood. Velik narrowed his eyes. And what is that? Rains leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. Innovation. The word sent a cold shudder through the room. You all think we won through sheer aggression, through chaos. But you're wrong. His voice was calm, patient, like a teacher explaining something obvious to a group of slow students. We won because we evolved faster than you. Every time you put up a defense, we found a way around it. Every system you thought was unbreakable, we cracked it in minutes. You had centuries to prepare for a challenge like us. He grinned, and it still wasn't enough. Velik's throat was dry. He wanted to argue. He wanted to deny what was happening. But he couldn't. Because it was true. The Council had thought they had time, centuries, perhaps even millennia, to continue their slow, methodical rule. Humans had torn it down in a day. Rains straightened, taking a step back. So here's the deal. You can either adapt to the new reality, our reality, or you can die clinging to the past. His smile faded, replaced by something cold and absolute. Either way, the galaxy moves forward, with or without you. The chamber remained silent, because there was no more argument, no more resistance. There was only the future, and it belonged to humanity. The war had ended years ago, or at least that's what the galaxy believed. The Treaty of Solara had ensured that no human fleet would ever rise again. The Galactic Dominion, the vast alien empire that had once feared Earth's military might, had reduced humanity to a minor species, their colonies scattered and weak. But they had made one mistake. They had forgotten the Revenant. The Revenant had been a myth, a ghost story whispered in the shadows of war-torn space. It was a Terran dreadnought, a battleship that had disappeared during the final days of the war, presumed destroyed in a desperate last stand. The Dominion had searched for it, hoping to confirm its destruction, but they never found the wreckage. Because it had never been destroyed, it had been waiting, watching, preparing. Now, as Dominion patrol ships vanished one by one, their broken hulls found drifting in empty space, a single message played over every hijacked communication channel. The Revenant has returned. Admiral Ralvek of the Dominion sat in his war room, his claws tapping against the cold metal of the command table. Reports flickered before him. Destroyed convoys, missing cruisers, distress signals that had ended abruptly. The pattern was undeniable. Some phantom force was hunting them, and its tactics were disturbingly human. A shudder ran through him. He had fought in the war against humanity. He had seen their resilience, their brutal efficiency, their refusal to surrender even when outnumbered 10-1. It had taken the combined might of half the galaxy to break them. And now, something was fighting back. Ralvek turned to his second-in-command, a nervous-looking officer from the insectoid Ftara species. What do we know? The officer hesitated. We have survivors from the Dravuk's wrath. They claim they saw it. Silence fell over the war room. Ralvek's eyes narrowed. Saw what? The ship, Admiral. The officer swallowed hard. A human battleship, unlike anything we've seen before. Black as night, moving without sound. It struck them without warning, tore through their defenses like paper. Their shields did nothing. Their weapons had no effect. And then... Ralvek leaned forward. Then what? The officer's mandibles twitched. Then it spoke to them. A hush fell over the room. Ralvek's breathing slowed. What did it say? The officer's voice was barely a whisper. It said, "You took everything from us. Now we take it back." The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Panic spread through the Dominion like wildfire. A single battleship should not have been a threat to an empire spanning thousands of star systems. But this was no ordinary battleship. The Revenant was something else, something beyond reason, beyond fear. It hunted them like prey, striking from the darkness and leaving nothing behind but wreckage and terror. Admiral Ralvek's claws curled against the armrest of his command chair as he watched the latest transmission. It was a security feed pulled from the wreckage of the Dravok's Wrath, salvaged just before the ship had been lost to the void. The footage flickered, distorted by damage, but the scene was clear enough. The Dominion cruiser's corridors were a mess of flashing red lights and flickering holograms, its crew scrambling in confusion. The klaxons howled. Enemy detected, shields failing, weapons offline. Then, the cameras went dark. Seconds later, the feed resumed, but the image had changed. The bridge of the Dravok's Wrath was now silent. The crew, Dominion officers, hardened warriors, beings who had once crushed human resistance without hesitation, sat motionless. Their eyes were wide, their bodies frozen in their seats. The ship's intercom crackled. A voice, low and mechanical, whispered through the speakers. "Did you think we forgot?" Ralvek clenched his jaw as the screen flickered again, revealing the last image recovered from the cruiser's black box. A single, massive warship loomed in the darkness, its hull matte black, shaped like an ancient war god. Its presence alone sent a chill down his spine. No Dominion vessel had ever been built like this. No elegance, no sleek design, no glowing energy cores pulsing with alien power. This thing was pure brutality, cold, silent, deadly. And then the footage ended. The Dravok's Wrath had been wiped from existence moments later. Ralvek exhaled sharply and turned to his officers. "How many confirmed attacks?" The Ftara officer hesitated before answering. 17, Admiral, over the past standard month. Most in uncharted sectors, but it's moving closer to core territory. We believe it's hunting key Dominion supply lines. 17 attacks. 17 Dominion warships destroyed in an instant. Ralvek resisted the urge to snarl. This wasn't just a rogue battleship. This was a strategy. A long-term, calculated war campaign. This was revenge. "Has anyone engaged it directly?" he asked. The room was silent. Then, a younger officer, a reptilian Dragari, stepped forward hesitantly. "The warlord of the Third Fleet attempted to track it down." Ralvek narrowed his eyes. "And?" The officer's throat bobbed. "The fleet never returned." Ralvek felt his breath catch. The Third Fleet had numbered over 50 warships, armed with the best Dominion weaponry. And now, nothing. No distress signals, no wreckage, just silence. A slow, cold realization settled over him. The Revenant wasn't just attacking, it was winning. He turned toward his command console, bringing up a galaxy-wide map. If this ship was targeting supply lines, there was only one logical next step. The Dominion's most crucial outpost in this sector, Station Varkos 9, a massive fortress, heavily defended, armed with enough firepower to obliterate an entire fleet. If the Revenant struck there, it would send a message. Ralvek straightened. "Alert all forces in the Varkos sector. Mobilize every warship in the region. I want the Revenant hunted down and obliterated." The officers saluted and rushed to carry out his orders. But as they did, a single thought gnawed at the back of Ralvek's mind. It wasn't just the power of this ship that disturbed him. It was the precision, the patience, the overwhelming hatred that seemed to guide its every move. This was no blind act of revenge. This was war. And the Revenant had just begun its hunt. The battle for Varkos 9 was supposed to be swift and decisive. Ralvek had gathered everything the Dominion could spare, an armada of warships, defense platforms, and planetary shields strong enough to withstand a solar flare. If the Revenant dared to attack, it would meet the full wrath of the Dominion. And yet, deep in his gut, Ralvek felt something close to fear. For weeks, they had chased shadows. No enemy transmissions, no patterns they could predict, just silent death, striking from the darkness. Now, all they could do was wait. The command deck of Varkos 9 was a fortress of steel and holographic screens, alive with movement. Tactical officers shouted reports, captains checked their fleets, and sentry drones patrolled the void. Everything was in place. The trap was set. Then the lights flickered. A small disturbance, barely noticeable, but Ralvek saw it. The Dominion used the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Their stations did not flicker. His claws tightened against the armrest. "Status report," he barked. A reptilian officer checked his console. "Power fluctuations detected, but all systems are operational." Another flicker. This time the screens distorted for a fraction of a second. Then the alarm screamed. "Unidentified vessel inbound." Ralvek shot to his feet. "Show me." The main display shifted, revealing a feed from the outer defense grid. At first there was nothing. Just the blackness of space, dotted with Dominion warships in tight formation. Then, the stars shifted, bending unnaturally, a ripple in the void. And then, it emerged, a hulking mass of black metal, its shape a twisted mockery of Dominion design. It did not glide through space. It stalked, moving like a predator through the void. No thruster trails, no energy signatures, just a silent, vengeful ghost. The Revenant. For a moment nobody spoke. Even the battle-hardened officers, creatures bred for war, stared in stunned silence. Then, the ship spoke. The station's intercom crackled, filled with static. Then came the voice, cold, mechanical, yet unmistakably human. "You stole our future." The lights cut out. Panic surged through the command deck. Consoles sparked, screens went dark, and the station trembled as if something enormous had gripped it. Then the first explosions rocked the fleet. A Dominion warship, one of their finest battlecruisers, erupted into a violent inferno. No weapon discharge had been detected. No shields had been breached. It simply ceased to exist, torn apart in an instant. "Fire! Fire!" Ralvek roared. The fleet obeyed. 1,000 weapons turned on the black monstrosity, unleashing a storm of plasma, rail fire, and antimatter rounds. The void itself seemed to burn as the Dominion's full might was hurled at the Revenant. For a moment, it was lost in the firestorm. And then, it emerged, untouched. Its black hull absorbed the carnage like a void swallowing light. Then it answered. Laser fire streaked from the ship, but this was no ordinary barrage. The Dominion's finest warships buckled and collapsed, their hulls twisting in impossible ways. Some simply vanished from existence, as if they had never been there. Others were left adrift, their crews frozen in eerie silence. It was not a battle, it was an execution. One by one, the Dominion ships fell. Ralvek watched, horror rising in his chest, as the Revenant moved toward Varkos 9 itself. The intercom crackled again. "You took everything from us?" The station trembled. "Now we take everything from you." The last thing Ralvek saw before the world went white was the vengeful black warship, watching them from the void. Then the station detonated. The destruction of Varkos 9 sent shockwaves through the Dominion. The station had been a symbol of their dominance, an impenetrable fortress that no force had ever dared challenge. And now it was gone, reduced to nothing but drifting debris and silent distress beacons. The Revenant hadn't just won. It had annihilated them. Across the Dominion, panic spread. Warships abandoned their posts, fleeing to safer sectors. Governors sent desperate messages to the High Council, demanding reinforcements, answers, anything to stop the nightmare hunting them. But no help came, because no one knew how to stop it. Admiral Ralvek awoke to darkness. His body ached, his vision blurred. The last thing he remembered was the explosion, the station tearing apart around him. Then, nothing. He was supposed to be dead. Instead, he was alive. The dim emergency lighting flickered as his vision cleared. He was in a containment cell, cold, metal walls surrounding him, a single reinforced door sealing him inside. His uniform was torn, his communicator missing. Then he heard it. Footsteps, not the heavy gait of Dominion guards, not the clicking steps of insectoid officers. These were different, measured, slow, human. The door hissed open. A figure stepped inside. Ralvek had fought against humanity, had killed them in battle, had ordered the destruction of their colonies. He had seen them break. He had seen them bleed. But the man standing before him, this was something else. Tall, clad in a dark uniform with no insignia. His face was obscured by a black visor, the kind worn by deep space operatives. He carried no weapons, yet the air around him was suffocating with authority. Ralvek forced himself to sit up, his claws curled into fists. "What do you want?" he growled. The human said nothing at first. He simply stared, studying him. Then, in a voice colder than the void itself, he spoke. "Tell me, Admiral." He took a step closer. "Do you remember Jericho?" Ralvek's breath caught in his throat. Jericho, a human colony. No, more than that. A graveyard, a place the Dominion had erased from existence. Decades ago, during the final days of the war, the Dominion had turned its weapons on Jericho, reducing it to ashes. Billions of humans had lived there, civilians, families, children, all wiped out in a single, merciless bombardment. And now, standing before him, was a ghost of that massacre. Ralvek swallowed. Jericho was a casualty of war. It was... The human struck. Not with a weapon, not with rage, with silence. Ralvek had been trained to endure pain, to withstand interrogation. But the way this human looked at him made his blood freeze. It wasn't anger. It wasn't vengeance. It was justice. "Casualty?" the human repeated, his voice sharp as a blade. "That's what you called it?" Ralvek forced himself to hold his gaze. "We did what was necessary." The human exhaled slowly. Then he reached up and removed his visor. What Ralvek saw nearly made him recoil. The man's face was lined with scars, deep and jagged, as if he had barely survived a firestorm. His right eye was a mechanical implant, glowing faintly with blue light. But it was his left eye, the one that was still human, that struck Ralvek the hardest. Because it was filled with something he had never seen before. Not rage, not hatred, something worse, cold, calculated, purpose. "You think this is revenge?" the human said. "It's not." He leaned in closer. "This is a reckoning." Ralvek's breath was shallow. His mind raced. "You can't win," he said. "The Dominion will hunt you down. They will—" The human smiled. "No," he said. "They won't." He turned and gestured to the cell's single window, a reinforced viewport overlooking space. Ralvek followed his gaze. And his heart stopped. Outside, stretching as far as he could see, was a fleet. Not Dominion warships, not scavengers or mercenaries. Human ships, hundreds of them. Some sleek and modern, others patched together from old wrecks. Warships, cruisers, fighter carriers, an entire armada hidden in the void. Waiting. Ready. "You thought you killed us," the human said. His mechanical eye glowed brighter. You only made us stronger. Ralvik could do nothing but stare. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. Ralvik couldn't tear his eyes away from the fleet beyond the viewport. It was impossible. Humanity's warships had been destroyed, their fleets shattered. The Treaty of Solara had ensured that no human force could rise again. And yet, here they were. Hundreds of ships gathered in silent defiance, waiting like wolves in the dark. Ralvik turned back to the man standing before him. His mind raced for explanations, for logic. How? The human smirked, as if he could read Ralvik's thoughts. You believed the Dominion broke us, that we scattered like dust. He glanced at the fleet outside. But you forgot something about humanity. Ralvik swallowed, his throat dry. The human leaned in, voice like ice. We adapt. The Dominion had spent decades hunting the last remnants of the Terran fleet, ensuring humanity never again threatened their rule. They had crushed resistance movements, assassinated rebel leaders, sabotaged hidden colonies. But they had never found the Revenant. They had never found this. Ralvik forced his voice to steady. The Dominion is vast. You cannot fight us. The human smiled, cold, knowing. We don't need to fight you. He turned away, stepping toward a nearby console. With a flick of his fingers, a holographic display flared to life. Dozens of Dominion sectors appeared on the screen, their trade routes, military outposts, and communication relays marked in red. Ralvik's stomach twisted. They knew everything. The human gestured toward a single point, deep in Dominion space. This is Xeranus Prime, he said, one of your most critical supply hubs. He shifted the display to another planet. This is Tolvaris, where your fleet shipyards operate. A third image. This is the Dominion High Council's secure location. Ralvik's heart pounded as realization set in. This wasn't just about the Revenant. This was a war humanity had been planning for years, and it had already begun. The human turned back to Ralvik. Your empire is vast, he admitted, but it's also brittle. Your people believe they're safe, that their leaders are untouchable. His mechanical eye glowed brighter. We're going to prove them wrong. Ralvik's claws tightened. You're a fool if you think the Dominion will fall so easily. The human laughed softly. Easily? Number. But that's the beauty of it, Admiral. He leaned in, his scarred face inches away from Ralvik's. We don't need to win. Ralvik's breath hitched. We just need to make you bleed. A chill ran down his spine. The Dominion was built on fear. Fear of its power, fear of its control. But what happened when that fear turned against them? When their enemies didn't crumble but struck back harder? Panic, disorder, collapse. Ralvik could already see it. The Dominion was about to learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. The human turned away, stepping toward the exit. The door hissed open. Ralvik forced himself to speak. Who are you? The man paused. He glanced back, that same cold smirk on his face. My name doesn't matter, he said. Only the message does. The lights flickered again. The ship hummed with energy. Ralvik realized with sinking horror what was about to happen. They were heading into Dominion space, straight into the heart of the Empire, straight into the fire. The war had begun, and the Revenant was leading the charge. Ralvik sat motionless in his cell, staring at the holographic projection still flickering before him. The Dominion's empire. Mapped, analyzed, targeted. He had spent his life believing humanity was defeated, that their war machine had been broken beyond repair. But it hadn't been broken. It had been forged into something worse. The Revenant wasn't just a battleship. It was a specter of vengeance, a legend made real. And now it was carrying him. one of the highest-ranking admirals in the Dominion, straight into the heart of their territory. For what purpose, he still didn't know. The ship trembled ever so slightly, a barely perceptible shift in motion. They had entered hyperspace. A voice crackled over the intercom, mechanical yet calm. "Admiral Ralvek, you're awake." Ralvek looked towards the source, an unseen speaker embedded in the cell walls. "What do you want from me?" he growled. There was a pause before the voice responded. "Perspective." Ralvek narrowed his eyes. "I have nothing to say to a ghost." A chuckle, not mocking, amused. "Perhaps, but you're more useful to us alive than dead." Ralvek stiffened. So that was it. They didn't kill him because they wanted something. Information? Strategy? Or something worse? He knew how the Dominion operated. He had overseen the crushing of human resistance groups, interrogated their captured soldiers, witnessed firsthand the resilience of their kind. But this was different. "Where are you taking me?" he demanded. Another pause. "Home." Ralvek felt a flicker of confusion. "What do you mean?" The voice didn't answer immediately. The intercom remained silent for several long, tense seconds before the cell door hissed open. Two figures stepped inside, both human, clad in dark, armored uniforms, their visors obscuring their faces. They carried no weapons, but the way they moved made it clear they didn't need them. These were soldiers. One of them gestured. "Come with us." Ralvek knew he had no choice. Even if he fought, even if he killed one of them, he was aboard the Revenant. There was no escape. So he followed. They led him through cold, narrow corridors. Unlike Dominion warships, which gleamed with polished steel and elaborate design, this vessel was functional. No excess, no decoration, just raw, brutal efficiency. And the deeper they went, the more Ralvek noticed something unnerving. The crew. Humans, all of them, but not just soldiers. Some were old, scarred veterans, their faces hardened by war. Others were younger, barely past adolescence, but their eyes burned with the same fire. Engineers, pilots, tacticians, an entire generation that should have been wiped out long ago. Yet here they were, thriving in the shadows. They passed an open hangar where sleek, black fighter craft sat in perfect rows. Along the walls, massive war banners hung. Not of Earth, not of any single human nation, but something else, a symbol of unity, of survival. Ralvek's claws tightened. The Dominion had underestimated them. Again. The soldiers stopped in front of a reinforced blast door. One of them pressed a console, and the door slid open with a heavy thunk. Ralvek stepped inside. The room was dark, except for a single table in the center. Holographic displays flickered to life, revealing Dominion star maps, supply lines, fleet formations. And across from the table, watching him with cold, calculating eyes, was him, the man from before. Ralvek forced himself to remain still. "What is this?" The human gestured towards the map. "A conversation." Ralvek scoffed. "You expect me to betray my people?" The man shook his head. "Number, we expect you to understand." He tapped the table, and the hologram shifted. New images appeared. Planets, colonies, settlements. But these weren't Dominion strongholds. They were human worlds, burned, glassed, destroyed. Ralvek didn't flinch. "War has casualties." The man's jaw tightened. "Do children count as casualties?" Ralvek said nothing. The human leaned forward. "The Dominion thought they won when they signed the treaty. They thought they had wiped out our fleets, crushed our leaders, broken our will." His mechanical eye gleamed. "But they didn't destroy all of us. Some of us survived, and we learned." He gestured at the hologram again. The image changed to Dominion worlds, bustling cities, industrial planets, fortress colonies. For decades you made us suffer, he said. Now it's your turn. Ralvik felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't just a rebellion. This was retribution. The human tapped the console one last time, and a final image appeared. Ralvik's breath caught. It was the Dominion homeworld. You're insane, Ralvik murmured. The man smiled. Not insane. He leaned back, his voice calm. Patient. Ralvik understood now. The Revenant wasn't just hunting Dominion forces. It was bleeding them dry. It was waiting for the right moment, the perfect strike. And that moment was coming. Fast. Ralvik clenched his fists. He had spent his life believing in the Dominion's strength, in its unshakable rule. But now, staring at the man across from him, at the silent fleet outside, he felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure the Dominion would survive. And humanity? They weren't just back. They were here to finish this. Ralvik's mind raced as he studied the Dominion homeworld projected before him. He had spent his life defending it, ensuring that no threat, human or otherwise, could ever reach its surface. And yet, now he sat aboard an enemy warship, watching as humanity plotted its downfall with the cold precision of a scalpel. For the first time in his long career, the thought crossed his mind. What if we lose? The man across from him, this nameless specter of vengeance, watched him carefully, as if measuring the weight of his silence. He didn't press, didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Ralvik exhaled sharply. You've survived in the shadows. I'll grant you that. But an insurgency is not an empire. The Dominion will never allow your kind to rise again. The human tilted his head. You think we want an empire? He chuckled softly. That's your way, Admiral. Conquer, control, assimilate. That's never been our goal. Ralvik frowned. Then what is your goal? The man leaned forward, fingers tapping against the table. Balance. The answer caught Ralvik off guard. He had expected something more blunt. Vengeance, destruction, conquest. But balance. You destroyed our home, the human continued, so we take away yours. You wiped out our fleets, so we bleed yours dry. You hunted us, so now we hunt you. His mechanical eye pulsed. Until the Dominion has no choice but to let humanity exist, unchallenged. Free Ralvik shook his head. And if we refuse? The human smiled. Then we bury you. Ralvik inhaled slowly. He had fought many battles, broken entire worlds in the name of the Dominion. He had faced desperate enemies before. But this was different. This wasn't desperation. This was inevitability. A sharp beep interrupted his thoughts. The hologram shifted, and a new feed appeared. An incoming transmission. The Dominion emblem flashed on screen before shifting to a familiar face. Admiral Karen, Ralvik's superior officer, the one now leading the charge to destroy the Revenant. Ralvik's blood ran cold. The human leader barely reacted. He simply turned to the two armored soldiers standing at the door. Bring him, he ordered. They hauled Ralvik to his feet, leading him toward the communications console. The transmission connected, and Karen's image filled the screen. His reptilian features were rigid with tension, his yellow eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of Ralvik, standing aboard a human warship. A long silence passed. Then Karen exhaled sharply. So, he muttered. It's true. Ralvik set his jaw. Sir. Quiet, Karen snapped. His gaze flicked past Ralvik to the human leader. You should have killed him when you had the chance, he sneered. A Dominion admiral is a liability, not a prize. The human smirked. I prefer my enemies conscious, It makes the lesson clearer. Karen bared his fangs. You think you're teaching us a lesson? The human turned slightly, gesturing toward the massive fleet outside. I think we already have. Karen's expression darkened. You don't understand what you've done, he growled. Destroying Varkos 9 was a mistake. You've forced our hand. The Dominion will burn every human world it can find. Ralvek felt his stomach tighten. That was not an empty threat. The Dominion was more than capable of reducing planets to ash, but the human remained unfazed. We expected nothing less, he said simply. But tell me, Admiral, do you really think this ends the way you want it to? Karen's eyes flickered with uncertainty for just a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but Ralvek saw it. Because Karen knew, the Dominion should have wiped humanity out decades ago, but they hadn't. And now humanity had returned. Stronger, smarter, more ruthless. Karen snarled. We will crush you. The human didn't blink. You already tried. He tapped a control on the console. The hologram shifted, showing another Dominion fleet, or rather, what used to be a fleet. The wreckage of dozens of ships drifted through space, their hulls torn apart, engines gutted. Karen's jaw tightened. We don't fight like we used to, the human continued. No more desperate last stands. No more open war. We strike where it hurts. We take away your power, your stability. We show the galaxy that the Dominion can bleed. Ralvek watched as Kieran's fingers twitched. The Dominion's entire rule was built on fear, on absolute control. If they lost that, if their people stopped believing in their invincibility, then they would crumble. Kieran's breathing slowed. Then, after a long pause, he said, This conversation is over. The screen flickered, then cut to black. Ralvek turned to the human. He'll come for you. The man nodded. We're counting on it. Ralvek frowned. You want him to attack? The human gave him a knowing look. The Dominion fights best when it controls the battlefield. He gestured around them. But this isn't your battlefield anymore. Ralvek's mind spun. If the Dominion launched an all-out assault, what would happen? Would the Revenant run? Or would it lead them into a trap? And then, for the first time, he realized something. He wasn't afraid for himself anymore. He was afraid for the Dominion, because humanity had spent years waiting for this war. And now, it was their turn to strike. The Dominion's response was swift. Within hours of Karen's transmission, Ralvek could feel the shift aboard the Revenant. The crew moved with silent precision, preparing for the inevitable. They had provoked the beast, and now the beast was coming. Ralvek had served the Dominion for decades. He knew how they operated. There would be no drawn-out conflict, no negotiations. They would send everything they had. A fleet large enough to crush any resistance, to erase the Revenant from existence. And yet, as he stood in the war room, watching the humans at work, he felt something unsettling. They weren't afraid. The holographic map displayed Dominion fleet movements in real time, intercepted from encrypted communications. The Dominion had mobilized a force unlike anything Ralvek had ever seen outside of full-scale planetary invasions. Thousands of ships, entire legions, enough to burn entire star systems to the ground. And yet, the human standing across from him, this nameless specter of vengeance, smirked as if he had expected it. Ralvek exhaled sharply. This is suicide. The human barely glanced at him. You don't understand what's happening, do you? Ralvek's claws curled into fists. I understand that you've sealed your own fate. The human chuckled. No, Admiral. We sealed yours. He gestured to the holographic projection. The Dominion's fleet was on the move, converging on the sector like a tidal wave. But the way the human watched it, his expression was not one of concern. It was satisfaction. Ralvik's eyes narrowed. You wanted them to come here? The human nodded. Of course. Ralvik's stomach twisted. Why? The human turned, walking slowly toward the viewport. Outside, the vast human fleet remained motionless, waiting. We spent years hiding, he said. Years watching, studying. We learned how the Dominion fights, how they think. We knew that if we hit you hard enough, if we struck where it hurt, you'd come looking for revenge. He turned back to Ralvik, his scarred face illuminated by the faint glow of the star charts. And now, we have you exactly where we want you. Ralvik felt something cold settle in his gut. The Dominion fleet was powerful, unstoppable, unless they had walked into a trap. The realization hit him like a gravity spike. This isn't an ambush, Ralvik murmured. The human smiled. No, Admiral. His mechanical eye pulsed. This is the execution. The Dominion fleet arrived with thunderous force, warping into the system like an unstoppable tide. Waves of battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, carriers, every warship bristling with weapons, shields glowing, engines burning hot with righteous fury. They had come to end the Revenant, to erase humanity's last warriors from existence. Admiral Kieran sat aboard the bridge of the Blood Oath, the command ship of the Dominion's armada. He watched as the human fleet remained still, seemingly frozen. They were outnumbered, outgunned. They had no hope of escape. He exhaled sharply. Fools. He turned to his bridge crew. Target their flagship. I want... The Dominion fleet's sensors flickered. A ripple in space. Something was wrong. Karen's eyes narrowed. Report. A Dominion officer checked the readings. His mandibles twitched. We have multiple new contacts. Karen stiffened. Where? A pause. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the officer said, Everywhere. The star map changed, and Kieran's blood ran cold. Surrounding the Dominion fleet, hidden until now, was another human force. Dozens, no hundreds of warships emerged from the void, their black hulls absorbing the light. Silent. Patient. Waiting for the right moment to strike. Kieran's claws dug into his chair. It's a trap. The human fleet moved, not in chaotic desperation, not in a disorganized charge. They struck like hunters. The first Dominion warship exploded before Kieran could give the order to fire. Its shields collapsed in an instant, its hull splitting apart like paper. Then another. And another. Panic spread through the Dominion ranks. They fired wildly, desperately, but the humans knew how they fought. They weaved through formations, exploited gaps, broke them apart. This wasn't a battle. This was a slaughter. Karen's breathing turned ragged as he watched his fleet, his invincible fleet, fall apart. How? How had it come to this? A crackle echoed through the Blood Oath's intercom, and then he spoke. The human leader's voice was calm, steady. Did you really think we'd fight you on your terms? Karen's jaw clenched. The difference between you and us, the human continued, is that you thought we were defeated. You thought we would beg, run, hide. The transmission cut for a moment. The Blood Oath shook as another Dominion warship was obliterated. Then the voice returned. But we never stopped fighting. Karen's claws trembled. And now? A long pause. Now, we finish this. The Revenant emerged from the darkness. Like a god of war, it cut through the void, weapons glowing like dying stars. It moved with terrifying grace, its sheer presence sending shudders through every Dominion vessel. And as it bore down on the Blood Oath, Karen finally understood. This was no rebellion. This was retribution. And the Dominion? The Dominion was already dead. Ralvek stood aboard the Revenant, watching as the Dominion's mighty armada collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. For so many years, he had believed humanity was finished. Now, he saw the truth. Humanity hadn't died. It had become something else, something stronger, something the Dominion could never stop. The war was over, and humanity had won. The Revenant had returned.